The Galactic Council watched in awe. Humans won the war in 5 hours, Art 1. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council hung in the silent dark of space, wrapped in the soft blue glow of Xylos Prime's dying sun. It was not built of metal or stone, but of living crystal grown over centuries, shaped by minds far older than human history. Inside, 200 alien species sat in wide, curving rings that spiraled upward like the inside of a seashell. Some delegates shimmered with bioluminescent skin. Others clicked their mandibles in quiet conversation, and a few floated in anti-grav pods filled with thick, breathable fluid. The air smelled faintly of ozone and old incense, a tradition kept from the Council's earliest days. At the center of it all, a massive holodisplay flickered above the floor, showing ruined cities, broken warships, and drifting debris fields. The images came from the outer rim of the Krell hegemony, once a feared empire of conquerors now reduced to ash and silence. The destruction had happened so fast that most council members had only just received confirmation. 5 hours. That was all it took. 5 hours for an entire war machine, built over 200 years to vanish from the stars. Councillor Veln of the Zetherian Concord stood at the speaking platform, his long silver robes trailing behind him. His face was narrow, his eyes dark and deep-set, and his voice carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed without question. He had called this emergency session not to celebrate, but to scold. The humans, he believed, had broken galactic law by launching an unprovoked attack. They were newcomers, barely admitted into the Council 3 decades ago, and still seen by many as reckless, emotional, and dangerously unpredictable. Velen activated the comms. "Bring in the human delegation," he said, his tone flat. A side door slid open with a soft hiss. 2 humans walked in. They wore simple gray uniforms with no medals, no armor, no visible weapons. The man was tall and broad, with short brown hair and calm eyes that took in the room without fear. His name was Daniel Briggs, captain of Earth's Joint Strategic Response. Beside him stood a woman with sharp features and dark hair pulled into a tight bun. Her name was Maya Ruiz, a lieutenant and one of Earth's top tactical analysts. They stopped at the center of the floor and stood shoulder to shoulder, silent, waiting. The room fell still. Even the usual hum of alien chatter faded. Many species had never seen humans up close. To them, humanity was a rumor, a young race that had barely survived its own planet before reaching for the stars. Now, that same race had erased the Krell fleet like it was nothing. Velen stepped down from the platform and approached them slowly. "You know why you are here," he said. Briggs nodded once. "We do." "Then explain," Velen said, his voice rising slightly. "Explain how your species, with its outdated ships and fragmented governments, destroyed the Krell hegemony in 5 standard hours. Explain how you bypassed every treaty, ignored every warning, and waged total war without consulting this council." Ruiz shifted her weight but did not speak. Briggs looked around the room, meeting the eyes of delegates from a dozen different worlds. "We didn't start the war," he said simply. "You fired the first shot," Velen snapped. "No," Briggs replied. "The Krell did." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Krell had attacked human colonies 3 weeks earlier, burning cities on New Carthage and wiping out the orbital station at Epsilon 9. The Council had known about it, of course, but had done nothing. To them, it was just another border skirmish. Humans versus Krell, 2 young powers fighting over scraps. They had expected the humans to lose, maybe even vanish from the galactic map. No one had expected this. The Krell struck without warning. Ruiz finally spoke, her voice clear and steady. "They killed over 2 million people in the first hour. Earth Command asked the Council for help. You told us to exercise restraint." Velen's jaw tightened. That was true. The Council had issued a formal notice urging both sides to de-escalate. It was the same notice they sent for every minor conflict. They never imagined the humans would respond with such finality. "So you decided to end it yourselves," Velen said. "We decided to survive," Briggs corrected. Another delegate, a hulking Gorvax warrior named Kor, slammed a heavy fist on his console. "Survival does not justify genocide," he boomed. "The Krell homeworld is silent. Their fleets are dust. Their leaders are gone. That is not defense, that is extermination." Briggs turned to face him. No Krell civilian was harmed. No city was bombed. No planet was glassed. Every action we took targeted only military assets and command structures. We left their people alive, and how? Veln asked, his voice quieter now. How is that even possible? The Krell fleet had over 300 capital ships. Their armor could withstand neutron bursts. Their shields regenerated faster than any known weapon could break them. And yet, your forces dismantled them in less time than it takes to brew a cup of tea. Ruiz took a step forward. Because we didn't fight them the way they expected. The room grew even quieter. Even the ambient hum of the crystal walls seemed to pause. Veln studied them both. He had expected arrogance, pride, maybe even gloating. Instead, he saw only calm certainty. These humans were not boasting. They were stating facts as plainly as someone might describe the weather. Then tell us, Veln said slowly. Tell us how you did it. Briggs glanced at Ruiz. She gave a small nod. And so, in the heart of the Galactic Council, surrounded by beings who had ruled the stars long before humans learned to sail the oceans, the two humans began to explain, not with grand speeches or dramatic gestures, but with quiet clarity. They spoke of strategy, of patience, of understanding an enemy better than the enemy understood itself. They spoke of a war that was won not with fire, but with silence. As they talked, the skepticism in the room began to shift. It was not replaced by admiration, not yet, but by something far more dangerous to the old order: doubt. Doubt that the galaxy had ever truly understood humanity, doubt that the rules of war were as fixed as they once believed. And high above them, the holo display still showed the wreckage of the Krell Armada, floating in cold silence, a monument not to human rage but to human thought. Veln listened, and for the first time in his long life he felt something unfamiliar. Awe. 3 weeks before the council meeting, the edge of human space was quiet. The colonies along the Orion Spur hummed with daily life, farmers tending hydroponic fields, engineers fixing orbital relays, children playing in domed parks under artificial suns. No one expected war. The Krell hegemony had been distant, arrogant, but mostly occupied with its own internal power struggles. Then the alarm sounded. It started with a burst of static on deep-range sensors. Then came the first ship, massive, black, shaped like a jagged claw. Then 10 more. Then 100. The Krell Armada dropped out of warp near the colony of New Carthage without warning or message. Their weapons fired before their comms even opened. Orbital defense platforms melted like wax. The colony's shield grid collapsed in under 3 minutes. Within the hour, fire rained from the sky. Cities burned. Millions ran for underground bunkers, but there were not enough. Earth Command received the distress call just as the colony's main transmitter went dark. Admiral Frank Keller stood in the dim blue light of the Luna Command Center, his face tight. He was a man in his late 50s with thinning gray hair and eyes that had seen too many close calls. Around him, officers moved quickly but quietly. Panic was not allowed here. Not ever. Keller knew the Krell. He had studied their tactics for years. They believed in overwhelming force, in terror as a weapon. They crushed resistance fast so others would surrender without a fight. And they never ever showed mercy. The council had been contacted immediately. A formal request for aid was sent through official channels. The reply came 12 hours later. The Galactic Council urges all parties to exercise restraint and seek diplomatic resolution. Keller read the message once, then deleted it. Diplomacy would not save New Carthage. It was already gone, but Earth was not defenseless. For years, human scientists and soldiers had been preparing, not for a war of brute strength, but for something smarter. They called it Operation Silent Hammer. It had no big ships, no planet-busting bombs, no flashy new weapons. Instead, it relied on 2 things: understanding the enemy and using their own strength against them. Colonel Lisa Tran was aboard the stealth frigate Valkyrie, hidden in the asteroid belt near Jupiter. She was young for her rank, only 34, but sharp-eyed and calm under pressure. Her crew trusted her completely. When the Krell attacked, she didn't panic. She activated Phase 1. Across human-controlled space, thousands of small drones, no bigger than a human hand, woke from standby. They looked like space junk, like broken sensor pods or old mining bots. The Krell ignored them. Why wouldn't they? They were tiny, unarmed, and scattered, but each one carried a simple AI, a listening device, and a tiny signal repeater. As the Krell fleet moved deeper into human territory, these drones followed. They slipped into the gaps between ships, clung to hulls, drifted near exhaust vents. They did not attack. They watched. They listened. They learned. Back on Luna, Tech Sergeant Owen Carter sat in a dark room filled with screens. He was not a soldier in the traditional sense. He wore a faded hoodie and drank too much coffee, but his mind moved faster than most battle computers. He and his team monitored every signal the drones picked up. Krell comms, engine rhythms, command frequencies, even the biosigns of bridge crews. They're rigid, Owen said, eyes locked on a data stream. Every ship reports to a central command node. No deviation. If the node gives an order, every ship obeys instantly. No questions, no backup plan. Dr. Nina Patel, a linguist and behavioral analyst, nodded beside him. She had spent years studying alien communication patterns. It's not just discipline, she said. It's biology. Their neural structure links them to their commanders through a shared resonance field. They don't just follow orders, they feel them as truth. That was the key. The Krell didn't just have a chain of command, they were wired to obey it like a reflex. Break the command and the whole system would collapse. Admiral Keller gave the order. Phase 2 began. Human cyber teams led by Nina and Owen started feeding false data into the Krell network. Using the drones as relays, they mimicked Krell command signals. At first, the fakes were small, minor course corrections, false sensor readings. The Krell ships adjusted without question. Then the lies grew bigger. A dreadnought received orders to fire on a nearby cruiser, labeled as enemy infiltrator. It obeyed. The cruiser, confused but loyal, returned fire. Within minutes, 2 Krell ships were locked in a deadly duel, neither realizing they were on the same side. More false orders followed. Ships broke formation. Squadrons turned on each other. Confusion spread like a virus. Still, the humans did not show themselves. No human warship fired a single shot. No fleet jumped into the system. To the Krell, it seemed like their own command structure was failing. Paranoia took hold. Captains demanded verification, but the rigid system had no room for doubt. Doubt was weakness. Weakness was death. Colonel Tran watched from the Valkyrie, her fingers resting lightly on the console. She could see the chaos unfolding on her screens. Krell ships drifting in broken arcs, comms screaming with conflicting orders, entire wings vanishing from formation. Phase 3, she said softly. From hidden bases on Mars, the Moon, and deep space platforms, human ships powered up not to fight but to broadcast. A single frequency, tuned precisely to the Krell's neural resonance band. It wasn't a weapon in the usual sense. It didn't explode or burn, it simply overrode. The moment the signal hit, every Krell commander on every ship froze. Their eyes went blank. Their hands dropped from controls. Their minds, so tightly linked to the command field, overloaded from the conflicting inputs. They did not die. They simply shut down. The fleet became a graveyard of silent metal. Admiral Keller stood in the command center watching the final reports come in. The Krell Armada, 300 ships, millions of soldiers, the terror of the Outer Rim, was now just drifting wreckage. Not a single human life had been lost in the counterstrike. Not one city had been bombed. He exhaled slowly. It was over, but he knew the real battle was just beginning. The galaxy would not understand. They would call it trickery, cowardice, maybe even cruelty. They would not see the restraint it took to win without hatred, to destroy without rage. On the Valkyrie, Colonel Tran looked out the viewport at the silent Krell ships floating in the void. She felt no joy, only quiet resolve. Back on Earth, children played in the domes again. The sky was clear. The war had lasted 5 hours, and no one outside human space had even seen it coming. The Krell Armada entered the Sol system at Oro 300 Terran Standard, moving in perfect formation like a school of dark fish through the void. Their ships were enormous, some longer than mountains, their hulls layered with armor that had shrugged off supernova-level radiation. They expected resistance. They expected fire. They expected humans to make their last stand near Earth, throwing everything they had into a desperate, messy battle. What they found was silence. No human warships waited in orbit. No defense grids lit up. No comms hailed them with threats or pleas. The inner system looked empty. Just a few civilian freighters, some maintenance drones, and the distant glow of Earth's cities turning with the slow rhythm of night and day. The Krell commanders, proud and certain, took it as proof of weakness. They pushed forward, deeper into the system, toward Mars, toward the moon, toward the blue-green jewel at the center. They did not notice the tiny objects drifting near their hulls. To the Krell, they were nothing, just space dust, old debris, harmless junk left over from human mining or construction. But each one was a micro-drone, no bigger than a human palm, built to mimic the thermal and radar signature of ordinary orbital clutter. They carried no weapons. They carried ears. Inside the lead dreadnought, High Commander Vrak stood on the command deck, his armored chest rising and falling with slow, confident breaths. He had crushed a dozen species in his career. Humans, he thought, would be easier than most. Soft, emotional, unprepared. He gave the order to begin planetary bombardment. Protocols. That was when the first glitch happened. Junior officer reported that sensor array Gamma was showing strange readings, another Krell cruiser. Drifting off course, weapons hot. Vrak frowned. That ship was under the command of his most loyal lieutenant. It made no sense. Before he could respond, a priority command signal flashed across his console. It bore the correct encryption, the right neural signature, even the proper command prefix. It read, Target Cruiser KX-78. It has been compromised by human infiltrators. Destroy immediately. Vrak did not hesitate. In the Krell way, doubt was death. Obedience was life. He ordered his gunners to fire. Plasma lances tore through the void and struck the cruiser dead center. The ship exploded in a bloom of fire and metal. Then, from the wreckage came a final transmission. Raw, panicked, unmistakably Krell. Why, brother? Vrak froze. That voice belonged to his lieutenant, his friend. Before he could process it, another signal arrived. This one ordered him to reposition his fleet into a tighter defensive ring around Jupiter. Again, the codes were perfect. The neural imprint matched Fleet Admiral Zor himself. Vrak obeyed. As his ships turned, they blocked the line of sight for other vessels. Communications began to stutter. Sensor nets overlapped and confused each other. And in the chaos, more false orders flew through the network. Some telling ships to power down shields for maintenance, others labeling nearby allies as human mimics. The Krell fleet, once a single unstoppable fist, began to unravel. Aboard the stealth frigate Valkyrie, hidden in Jupiter's magnetic shadow, Colonel Lisa Tran watched it all unfold on her screens. Her crew sat in silence, eyes locked on data streams, fingers ready but still. They had trained for this moment for years. Not to fight, but to listen, to nudge, to guide the enemy into destroying itself. Phase 2 is holding, she said quietly. On Luna, Tech Sergeant Owen Carter leaned forward in his chair, eyes darting across a dozen live feeds. He and his team were deep inside the Krell comms network now, not hacking it in the old way, but whispering into it, like ghosts in a dream. They used the drones as relay points, bouncing signals that sounded exactly like real Krell commands. The Krell system had no concept of deception. It trusted its own voice completely. Dr. Nina Patel sat beside him, analyzing voice stress patterns and command rhythms. They're starting to question, she said, but only in private channels. Publicly, they still obey. That's the trap, Owen replied. The more they doubt, the more they follow orders, to prove they're loyal. It was a perfect loop of fear and obedience. Back in the Sol system, the chaos grew. Two battle groups opened fire on each other over a misread signal. A supply carrier veered into a destroyer's path, causing a collision that crippled both. A command cruiser shut down its weapons for a diagnostic that never ended. Still, no human ship revealed itself. At 0630, Admiral Frank Keller gave the final order from Luna Command. Initiate pulse, Colonel Tran nodded. On her command, 3 human vessels, Valkyrie, Raven, and Warden, rose slowly from Jupiter's shadow. They did not fire missiles. They did not raise shields. They simply powered up a single emitter on their hulls and broadcast a narrow band signal directly into the heart of the Krell fleet. The signal was not loud. It was precise. It matched the exact frequency of the Krell's biosynaptic neural cores, the part of their brains that linked them to their command structure. For centuries, this link had made them unstoppable. Now it became their weakness. The pulse hit like a silent wave. On every Krell ship, commanders gasped. Their eyes rolled back. Their bodies went stiff. Then they collapsed, Not dead, just gone. Their minds overloaded by a signal that felt like 1,000 orders screaming at once. Without commanders, the fleet froze. Automated systems tried to take over, but they were not built for independent thought. Engines idled. Weapons powered down. Ships drifted. By 0745, the Krell Armada was a graveyard of silent metal. Admiral Keller stood in the command center, watching the final status report scroll across the main screen. All Krell capital ships disabled. No human casualties. Earth untouched. He turned to his aide. Send the cleanup teams. Recover any survivors. Treat them as prisoners of war, not enemies. On the Valkyrie, Colonel Tran looked out at the drifting Krell ships. She felt no triumph, only relief. The plan had worked. Not because humans were stronger, but because they had listened. They had studied. They had understood that the greatest weapon was not fire, but knowledge. Back on Earth, the sun rose over quiet cities. Children walked to school. Farmers checked their crops. No one had heard a single explosion. The war had lasted 5 hours, and it had ended not with a bang, but with a whisper. Back in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, silence hung thick in the air like fog. The two humans, Daniel Briggs and Maya Ruiz, stood calmly as accusations flew from every side. The Gorvax delegate Kor pounded his massive fist again and growled that humanity had used forbidden mind weapons. The Lumine envoy, her translucent skin pulsing with soft violet light, claimed the humans had violated the Sanctity Accord by tampering with neural biology. Others muttered about hidden superweapons, secret alliances, or ancient Earth tech stolen from dead civilizations. Counselor Veln listened, his silver robe still, his face unreadable. He had seen wars before, wars of fire, of plague, of gravity wells collapsing entire systems. But this was different. There were no blast craters on Krell worlds, no poisoned atmospheres, no enslaved populations, just silent ships and confused survivors. He turned to Briggs. You say you use no weapons, Veln said slowly. Yet an entire fleet lies dead in space. Explain this contradiction. Briggs did not flinch. They aren't dead, he said. Their commanders are unconscious, yes, but alive. Medical teams are already treating them. The rest of the Krell forces surrendered once they realized their leaders were down. No one fired on them. No one threatened them, they just stopped. Ruiz stepped forward. We can show you the truth. Not just our logs, yours too. She tapped a small device on her wrist. The hollow display above the floor flickered, then split into dozens of windows. Some showed footage from human drones. Others came from neutral sources, a Zetherian science outpost near the Sol system, a Gorvax merchant vessel that had been hiding behind Saturn's rings, even a Krell black box recovered from a command cruiser. All showed the same thing. No explosions. No energy beams. No boarding parties. Just Krell ships turning on each other, then going dark one by one as a soft pulse swept through the fleet. The merchant footage clearly showed 3 small human frigates emerging from Jupiter's shadow, not firing, just broadcasting. The science outpost data confirmed the signal was non-destructive, targeted only at neural frequencies unique to the Krell. A low murmur spread through the chamber. Even Kor looked uncertain. The pulse did not harm their bodies, Ruiz explained. It only overloaded the command link in their brains. Think of it like shouting in a room where everyone is listening to one voice. The noise doesn't hurt their ears, it just makes them unable to hear the speaker anymore. Veln studied the footage. He saw Krell soldiers helping each other after the pulse, not fighting. He saw human medics treating them with care. He saw no signs of torture, no forced labor, no executions. Why show us this? He asked. Because you asked for the truth, Briggs said. And because we don't want fear to become the new law. The Lumine envoy floated closer. You claim restraint, she said, her voice like wind through glass. But you dismantled an empire in hours. That is not restraint. That is mastery. And mastery in the wrong hands is tyranny. Briggs met her gaze. We didn't seek mastery. We sought survival. The Krell gave us no warning, no chance to talk. They burned our colonies. We had 2 choices. Die quietly, or fight in a way that ended the war fast with as little blood as possible. He paused, then added, We chose the second. Not because we're clever, because we've seen what endless war does. On Earth we fought each other for centuries. We know the cost. Veln felt something shift inside him. He had always thought of humans as impulsive, ruled by emotion. But these two spoke with a clarity that felt older than their species. Another delegate, a small insectoid from the Vex Collective, clicked its mandibles nervously. "If your method works on the Krell, could it work on others?" Ruiz nodded. "In theory, yes. Every species has patterns, how they communicate, how they command, how they think. Break the pattern and the system stumbles. But we would never use this against you. Or anyone who hasn't attacked us first." "That's a promise," Briggs said. "Not a threat." The room fell quiet again. The accusations had lost their fire. What remained was something heavier, respect mixed with unease. Velen walked back to the center of the floor. He looked at the humans, then at the council. "You came here expecting monsters," he said to the delegates. "But you found something else. Not warriors, not conquerors. Strategists who value life enough to avoid killing when they can." He turned to Briggs and Ruiz. "The council will review your evidence. We will speak with the Krell survivors, and we will decide if your actions were just." Briggs nodded. "We ask for nothing more." As they turned to leave, Velen called out one last question. "If you could have won without harming anyone, why did you wait until they attacked?" Briggs stopped. "Because peace isn't just the absence of war," he said. "It's the choice to protect others even when you have the power to destroy them. We didn't want to be the ones who started it." Then they walked out, their footsteps soft against the crystal floor. Behind them, the council sat in silence. The holo display still showed the drifting Krell ships, now surrounded by human rescue vessels. No weapons drawn, no demands made, just help offered. Velen looked at the image and thought of all the wars his people had fought. Wars that lasted decades, that scarred worlds for generations. And here was a species that ended a war before breakfast. He did not feel fear anymore, he felt hope. In the days after the council session, the galaxy held its breath. The Krell hegemony, once a roaring storm of conquest, was now a broken thing. Its warships sat dark and empty in the Sol system. Its commanders, still recovering from the neural pulse, were confused, humbled, and strangely quiet. They had expected to rule the stars by fear. Instead, they had been stopped by silence. From their homeworld, now leaderless and fractured, the Krell sent a message, not of defiance, but of surrender. They asked for peace, not because they were beaten into dust, but because they finally understood. Humanity had not sought to destroy them, only to stop the killing. The Galactic Council met again, this time in private. For 3 days they debated behind closed crystal walls. Some still feared human tactics. Others argued that what humanity had done was not war, but something new, something cleaner, faster, and far more dangerous because it left no room for glory or revenge. But in the end, the evidence was too clear. The humans had broken no laws. They had used no banned weapons. They had harmed no civilians. And they had ended a war that could have dragged on for years, costing billions of lives across dozens of worlds. The council made its decision. Humanity would not be punished. Instead, they would be heard. Earth sent a new delegation, not soldiers this time, but diplomats. Paul Dawson, a quiet man with kind eyes and a steady voice, led the group. Beside him stood Chloe Bennett, a strategist who had helped design the final terms of peace. They arrived at Xylos Prime not in a warship, but in a simple shuttle painted white, with no markings except the Earth symbol on its side. The Krell representatives met them in a neutral chamber. They were not chained or guarded. They wore plain robes, their armor left behind as a sign of trust. Their lead envoy, once a high general named Torvak, looked older now, his scales dull, his posture bent. "We thought you would demand our worlds," Torvak said, his voice rough. "Or our weapons. Or our lives," Dawson shook his head. "We don't want your worlds. We don't want your weapons, and we certainly don't want your lives." "Then what do you want?" "One thing," Chloe said. "Access," Torvak frowned. "Access to what?" "To everything," Dawson replied. "Your history, your battles, your strategies, your mistakes, and not just yours, everyone's. All the records the Council keeps on war, peace, rebellion, and diplomacy. We want to study them, learn from them. So we never have to do this again." The Krell envoy stared at them. He had expected greed. He found curiosity instead. Back in the main council hall, the terms were read aloud. Humanity would not take a single Krell colony. They would not claim reparations. They would not even station troops near Krell space. In return, the Krell would dismantle their war fleet, release all prisoners they had taken from other species, and open their archives to human scholars. The Council approved it unanimously. As the agreement was signed, something strange happened. Delegates from other species, ones who had long feared human aggression, began to approach the Earth delegation. The Gorvax asked if humans would help them redesign their own defense systems to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. The Luminae offered to share their ancient texts on nonviolent conflict resolution. Even the Vex Collective, usually secretive and cold, requested a joint research project on predictive strategy. Humanity, once seen as reckless newcomers, was now seen as something else. Students who had learned faster than anyone expected. On Earth, life returned to normal. Children played in parks under real sunlight. Farmers harvested crops in fields that had not been touched by war. There were no victory parades, no monuments to battles won, only quiet relief. Admiral Frank Keller stood on a hill outside Geneva looking up at the stars. He had retired the day after the war ended. No medals, no speeches, just a simple handshake with his team and a promise to never forget why they fought. Colonel Lisa Tran visited the medical station where Krell commanders were recovering. She brought no guards, no weapons, just a translator and a question. What will you do now? One of them, a young officer named Jex, looked at her with tired eyes. We thought strength was control, he said. You showed us that true strength is knowing when not to use it. Back on Xylos Prime, Counselor Veln watched the human shuttle prepare for departure. It was small, unarmored, utterly ordinary, yet it carried a species that had changed the rules of war without firing a single shot. He turned to his aide. They didn't just win a war, he said softly. They made us rethink what peace could be. As the shuttle lifted off, Briggs and Ruiz sat in the rear seats, silent. They had done what they came to do, not to boast, not to conquer, but to explain. And the galaxy had listened. In the quiet corridors of Earth Command, old servers hummed with new data, Krell battle logs, Zetherian peace treaties, Gorvax defense schematics. Scholars like Nina Patel and Owen Carter pored over them, not to find better ways to fight, but better ways to prevent fighting altogether. Paul Dawson sent one final message to the Council before leaving Xylos Prime. It was short. Just 3 lines. We do not seek to rule the stars. We only wish to walk among you without fear. The Council saved the message in their central archive, under a new category, Lessons from Earth, and high above, in the endless dark, the stars burned as they always had, unchanged, eternal, watching a young species grow not through fire, but through wisdom.